The night I was erased from the family fortune, the house smelled like polished wood and lies. Every surface gleamed under warm chandelier light, the kind of light that makes everything look richer than it really is. The long dining table stretched like a battlefield, crystal glasses lined up like obedient soldiers, silverware placed with surgical precision. And yet my hands were shaking, not from the cold, from the feeling that something important was already being taken from me, quietly, while everyone smiled. Before I continue, tell me where you're watching from. And if you've ever faced betrayal, hit like and subscribe, because what happened next will shock you. I sat at the far end of the table, the seat I'd always taken since childhood, not by choice, by assignment. That was where I belonged in this family, present, but never centered, included, but never equal. Across from me sat my Aunt Lorraine, pearls resting on her collarbone like they owned her. She held her wine glass delicately, as if wealth was something fragile that might spill if she wasn't careful. To her left, my cousin Marcus leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, already wearing the relaxed confidence of someone who believed the world owed him something. And at the head of the table, my stepfather, Richard, the man who smiled like a mentor but calculated like a predator. My mother's chair was empty. That should have been my first warning. The lawyer cleared his throat, breaking the low hum of fake conversation that had filled the room moments earlier. Paper rustled. The sound cut straight through my chest. "We're here," he said, adjusting his glasses, "to formally read the amended estate documents." Amended. That word echoed inside me like a gunshot in a hallway. I looked around the table, faces calm, prepared, almost bored, except mine, because nobody had told me there was an amendment. The lawyer began reading names, assets, numbers that made my ears ring: property in upstate New York, investment portfolios, trust funds, generational wealth carefully stacked like bricks, passed from one hand to another. Every time a name was spoken, someone nodded or smiled or reached for their drink. When my name didn't come up the first time, I told myself to breathe. When it didn't come up the second time, my throat tightened. By the third omission, I felt it. That slow, sinking realization that crawls into your stomach before your brain catches up. I wasn't on the list. I leaned forward slightly. "Excuse me," I said, my voice softer than I intended. "You haven't read my portion yet." The lawyer paused, just for a second. But that second told me everything. He glanced at Richard. Richard didn't look back. Lorraine lifted her glass and took a slow sip. Marcus smirked. The lawyer adjusted his papers again. "Ms. Carter," he said carefully, "your name does not appear in the final distribution." The room went silent. No gasp, no shock, only the low hum of the chandelier above us, buzzing like it was amused. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It slipped out, sharp and hollow. "That's not possible," I said. Your mother signed the amendment," Richard cut in smoothly, finally meeting my eyes. Signed. The word landed hard. "She was very clear," he continued. This was her decision. I felt heat rise up my neck. "When?" "A few months ago," he said, folding his hands together. "Before she got sick." Sick. My chest tightened. My mother had been sick, yes, weak, confused, dependent. And suddenly, every unanswered call, every rushed conversation, every time Richard said, "She's resting, she'll call you later," they all lined up in my head like puzzle pieces snapping together. "I want to see the document," I said. Marcus laughed under his breath. "Still playing poor and proud, huh?" I turned to him. "Shut up." Lorraine clicked her tongue. "There's no need to be emotional." Emotional. That word. The lawyer hesitated, then slowly slid a copy of the amendment across the table toward me. My fingers brushed the paper. Cold, official, real. I scanned the page, heart pounding, eyes skimming legal language I barely recognized. And there it was. My name, not as a beneficiary, but as a line item. Removed from all financial distributions. Removed. Like a stain. Like a mistake. My vision blurred. She wouldn't do this, I whispered. She promised. Promises change, Richard said calmly. Circumstances change. I looked up at him, at the man who had moved into our lives when I was 16, who had slowly taken over decisions, money, conversations, hospital visits, the man who always spoke softly while cutting deep. You manipulated her, I said. His smile never broke. Careful. That was the moment I understood something. They hadn't just erased me from the fortune. They had erased my voice, my history, my right to question anything. The meeting ended quickly after that. Chairs scraped, glasses clinked. The lawyer packed his briefcase like nothing extraordinary had just happened. No one followed me when I stood up. No one called my name. As I walked down the long hallway toward the front door, the house felt different, larger, colder, like it no longer recognized me. I stepped outside into the night, the air sharp with winter and betrayal. My phone buzzed. A message. Unknown number. If you want the truth about the amendment, stop asking the wrong people. My breath caught. Before I could respond, another message appeared. Your mother didn't erase you. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, as a third message came through. They forged something, and I have proof. My fingers hovered over the phone as headlights turned slowly at the end of the driveway. Someone was watching the house. And suddenly I realized this wasn't just about money anymore. This was about a lie big enough to destroy an entire family. And I was standing right in the middle of it. Standing there, the cold seeping through my coat, I felt the weight of that sentence press into my bones, heavier than the night air. My fingers tightened around my phone as the headlights at the end of the driveway cut through the darkness, sweeping slowly across the front of the house like a searching eye. Whoever it was didn't pull in, didn't honk, just paused, then rolled away, leaving me with a racing heart and too many questions. I didn't respond to the message right away. Instinct told me not to. Instead, I walked to my car, every step crunching against gravel that sounded louder than it should have. The house loomed behind me, all glass and polished stone, glowing like a monument built to honor people who had already forgotten me. Inside my car, the silence was unbearable. I locked the doors, then unlocked them, then locked them again. My phone buzzed once more. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Union Station Cafe. Come alone, no name, no explanation, just a place and a time. I stared out the windshield, my reflection faint in the glass. My eyes looked older than they had that morning, harder, like something soft inside me had cracked. The drive home felt endless. Streetlights flickered past in a blur, and the radio played low, some late-night host laughing about things that didn't matter. When I finally parked outside my apartment, the building felt smaller than usual. Safe, but fragile. Like it could be taken from me, too. Sleep didn't come easy. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the document. The word removed. Richard's calm smile. Lorraine's pearls. Marcus leaning back like he'd already won. And my mother's empty chair. By morning, I was exhausted and wired all at once. I took a shower that lasted too long, letting the steam fog up the mirror so I wouldn't have to look at myself. I dressed simply. Jeans, a dark sweater, no jewelry, no armor, just me. Union Station was already buzzing when I arrived. Shoes clicking on marble floors, suitcases rolling, the smell of coffee and baked bread hanging in the air. I scanned faces as I walked, every stranger suddenly suspicious. The cafe sat near the west entrance, all exposed brick and metal chairs. I ordered a black coffee I didn't want and chose a table with my back to the wall. I waited. 9:05, 9:10. My phone buzzed. I'm here. I looked up. She stood near the counter, half hidden by a column. A woman in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. Brown skin like mine, hair pulled into a tight bun. She wore a security badge clipped to her belt. My heart skipped. Hospital. She approached slowly, eyes alert, scanning the room before sitting across from me. Up close, I noticed the lines around her eyes, not from age, from holding things in for too long. "My name is Denise," she said quietly. "I work night shifts at St. Mary's, oncology wing." My throat tightened. "You knew my mother." Denise nodded. "I was her primary nurse the last 6 weeks." The last 6 weeks. The time Richard never let me visit alone. "She talked about you," Denise continued. "A lot." I swallowed. "Then how did she sign that amendment?" Denise leaned closer, lowering her voice. "She didn't." The word hit me like oxygen after being underwater. "She was heavily medicated toward the end," Denise said. "Morphine, sedatives. Some days she couldn't even lift her hand." My pulse raced. "But the lawyer said—" "I know what the lawyer said," Denise interrupted. "I was there the night Richard brought the papers." My hands started shaking. I wrapped them around my coffee cup to hide it. "He came late," she went on, "after visiting hours. Said it was urgent. Said your mother wanted it done before things got worse." And she was barely conscious," Denise said. "In and out. Slurring." He held her hand. Guided the pen. My stomach turned. "That's illegal." "Yes," Denise said simply. "That's why I kept copies." She reached into her bag slowly and pulled out a small flash drive, sliding it across the table toward me like it was something dangerous. "There are security logs," she said, "medication charts, and video." "Video?" My voice cracked. Denise nodded. "The hallway camera. It doesn't show the signature itself, but it shows timing. Shows him entering and leaving with the lawyer. Shows your mother never leaving the bed." I stared at the flash drive. Proof. Small. Plastic. Powerful enough to blow everything apart. "Why come to me now?" I asked. "Why not before?" Her jaw tightened. "Because Richard found out I'd asked for a copy of her chart. I was suspended yesterday. Official reason was protocol violation. Unofficial reason?" She trailed off. "You're scared," I said. "Yes," Denise replied. "And so are you." She wasn't wrong. "If you use this," she added, "they'll come for you hard. Lawyers, money, smear campaigns. They won't play fair." I thought of Marcus's smirk, Lorraine's calm, Richard's warning. "Neither will I," I said. Denise's eyes softened. "Your mother loved you," she said gently. "She told me to make sure you knew that, in case something happened." Something happened. I slipped the flash drive into my pocket, my heart pounding with a mix of grief and determination. As I stood to leave, Denise caught my wrist. "One more thing." I looked back. "The amendment wasn't the only document he touched," she said. "There's another file, hidden, and if it surfaces—" She didn't finish the sentence. I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket again. This time, it was a text from Richard. "We need to talk, today." I looked up from the screen, my pulse roaring in my ears, because suddenly, I knew. They were already closing in, and the real fight hadn't even started yet. I didn't reply to Richard's message, not right away. I let the phone sit face down on the passenger seat as I drove, my hands tight on the steering wheel, my mind racing faster than the traffic around me. Every red light felt like an accusation. Every passing car felt like it might suddenly swerve into me, forcing me off the road before I could do what I needed to do next. I went straight home. I locked the door behind me and stood there for a long moment, listening. The hum of the refrigerator, a distant siren, my own breathing, uneven and loud in my ears. Only when I was sure I was alone did I pull the flash drive from my pocket. It looked so ordinary, like it couldn't possibly hold the truth that might give me my life back. My laptop booted up slowly, as if it knew what was coming and wanted to delay it. I plugged in the flash drive. A single folder appeared on the screen. Inside, dozens of files, dates, times, medical logs, security footage. I clicked the first video. The camera angle was grainy, fixed high in a hospital hallway. The timestamp glowed in one corner. I leaned forward as Richard came into view, walking with purpose, suit perfectly pressed, lawyer at his side. They disappeared into my mother's room. The timestamp jumped. They came out less than 20 minutes later. My mother never appeared. I pressed pause, my chest tightening as if someone had wrapped a belt around it and pulled. Denise hadn't exaggerated. If anything, this was worse than I'd imagined. Cold, calculated, efficient. I closed the laptop. I wasn't ready to watch the rest yet. Instead, I opened my phone and scrolled through old messages from my mother. Voice notes I'd been too busy to listen to at the time. Short texts filled with heart emojis and half-finished thoughts. I pressed play on one I hadn't heard before. Her voice was weak, but clear enough. "Baby," she said softly, "if anything ever feels wrong, trust that feeling. And don't let anyone make you feel small, not even family." Tears slid down my face before I could stop them. I wiped them away, stood up, and paced my living room. Anger began to settle in where grief had been, heavy, focused, dangerous. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Richard. It was Lorraine. "We hear you're upset. Let's handle this like adults." I laughed, sharp and bitter. Like adults, they meant quietly. I didn't respond. An hour later, there was a knock at my door. 3 sharp taps. Authority disguised as politeness. I looked through the peephole. Marcus, alone. I didn't open the door. "Come on," his voice came through, muffled but confident. "I know you're in there." I stayed silent. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he added. "We just want to talk." I opened the door just enough to keep the chain on. He leaned against the frame like he owned the place, eyes sweeping over me, my apartment, my life. "You look tired," he said. "Stress doesn't suit you." "What do you want?" I asked. "To make sure you don't do anything stupid," he replied easily. My jaw tightened. "Like fraud." His smile flickered. "Careful." "There's evidence," I said. "A lot of it." Marcus studied my face, then chuckled. "You think evidence matters when lawyers get involved? When reputations are on the line?" He leaned closer. "You walk into court with whatever you think you have, and they'll paint you as emotional, unstable, a grieving daughter looking for attention." I felt my pulse spike, but I held his gaze. "You always were like this," he went on, "making noise without leverage." I smiled, and that threw him off. "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what someone without leverage would say." His eyes hardened. "Listen," Marcus said, dropping the casual tone. "There's still room for compromise." "Compromise how?" "A settlement," he said. "Quiet money, enough to be comfortable, not enough to embarrass anyone." There it was. Hush money. I shook my head. "Get off my doorstep." He straightened slowly, annoyance flashing across his face. "You walk away from this. You keep your dignity." I met his eyes. "You already took that?" He stared at me for a long moment, then stepped back. "Suit yourself," he said. "But remember this conversation when things get ugly." He turned and walked down the hallway without looking back. I closed the door and slid down against it, my heart pounding. That night, I barely slept. Every sound made me jump. Every shadow felt like a threat. Around 3 in the morning, I got up and opened my laptop again. This time, I watched everything. Charts showing medication levels spiking before the signing. Logs showing unauthorized after-hours access. Emails between Richard and the lawyer marked urgent. And then one file I hadn't expected. a scanned document. Older. Yellowed. I leaned closer. It was a trust deed, created years ago. Before Richard. Before Lorraine's influence. Before my mother got sick. My name was there, not just included. Primary beneficiary. With a clause I'd never heard of before. A contingency. If the trust was ever altered under coercion or diminished capacity, all assets would transfer immediately to the original primary beneficiary. Me. My breath caught. This wasn't just proof of fraud. This was a weapon. My phone rang. Richard's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. A voicemail followed seconds later. His voice was calm. Too calm. "You don't understand what you're starting," he said, "and you're running out of time." I stared at the screen, my reflection dark and determined, because now I understood perfectly. And tomorrow, I was going to make my first move, one that would force them all into the light, whether they liked it or not. Morning came with a gray sky, and the sound of rain tapping against my window like a warning. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't need to. My body was tired, my mind razor sharp. Fear had burned itself out sometime before dawn, replaced by something colder, more deliberate. I made coffee I barely tasted and sat at my small kitchen table, laptop open, the trust deed glowing on the screen like a secret finally ready to breathe. Every word felt heavier now. Every sentence carried leverage. This document didn't just expose what they did, it reversed the power. I forwarded encrypted copies to 2 places, a probate litigation attorney Denise had quietly recommended, and a private cloud account, under a name that wasn't mine, insurance. By 10 a.m., my phone started ringing. I let it. First Richard, then Lorraine, then Marcus again. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I put on my coat and stepped back into the rain. The attorney's office sat in a converted brownstone downtown, old brick and brass plaques, the kind of place that smelled like leather chairs and expensive caution. The woman who greeted me introduced herself as Ms. Alvarez. Sharp eyes, no wasted movement. She read in silence, page after page. Her expression never changed, but I watched the way her fingers tightened slightly at certain lines. "This contingency clause," she said finally, tapping the paper, "is extremely specific." "I noticed," I replied. "If validated," she continued, "it doesn't just restore your inheritance. It triggers an immediate asset transfer and opens the door to criminal charges." I exhaled slowly. Forgery, coercion. "Abuse of a vulnerable adult," she added. "Potential conspiracy." My phone buzzed again on the table between us. Richard. Ms. Alvarez glanced at it, then back at me. "They know?" "They're panicking," I said. She nodded. "As they should be." We talked strategy for over an hour. Filings, temporary injunctions, freezing accounts before money could disappear. Every step carefully measured, like chess moves against players who thought they'd already won. When I left her office, the rain had stopped. The clouds hadn't. By the time I got home, a black SUV was parked across the street, engine off, windows tinted. My stomach tightened. I didn't slow down. I walked into my building, took the stairs instead of the elevator, and locked my door behind me. From the window, I watched the SUV sit there, motionless, for another 10 minutes before pulling away. A message came through seconds later. "You're being advised by people who don't understand how this ends," Richard wrote. "Come talk to me. Today. Last chance." I stared at the words. Last chance. I almost laughed. At 3 p.m., another knock came. This time I checked my phone camera before opening the door. Lorraine. Alone. That surprised me. I opened the door fully. She stood straighter than usual, pearls still in place, coat immaculate, eyes sharper than I remembered. She stepped inside without asking. "You've caused enough drama," she said, looking around my apartment like she was inspecting a rental. "You forged legal documents," I replied calmly. She waved a hand. Richard handled the technicalities. And you benefited, I said, her lips pressed together. That money belongs to the family. Hey, I am the family, I said. She looked at me then, really looked at me, and something ugly flickered across her face. You were always temporary, she said quietly. Your mother was sentimental, but blood is blood. I felt something snap. My blood, I said evenly, is exactly why you're standing here instead of already being served. Her eyes widened just a fraction. You don't have what you think you have, she said. I stepped closer. Then why are you here? Silence. She adjusted her coat. What do you want? The question came out softer than I expected. Everything that was stolen, I said. And accountability? She shook her head slowly. You'll ruin us. You ruined yourselves, I said. She studied me for a long moment, then turned toward the door. Richard won't forgive this. I don't need him to, I replied. After she left, my hands started shaking. Not from fear, from the weight of knowing there was no way back. At 7 p.m., Ms. Alvarez called. We filed, she said, emergency motion, accounts are frozen. I closed my eyes. Thank you. There's more, she added. Your stepfather's attorney just reached out. They want to negotiate. I let out a slow breath. Already? They're nervous, she said. And there's something else you should know. I waited. The lawyer who witnessed the amendment, she said, has retained his own counsel. My chest tightened. Why? He claims Richard pressured him, she replied. Says he was misled about your mother's condition. The walls seemed to tilt slightly. That means, yes, she said. Someone's breaking ranks. I hung up and sat in the dark. Lights off, city noise filtering in through the window. Sirens, laughter, life going on like nothing had changed. But everything had. My phone buzzed one last time that night. A new number. They're turning on each other. Be careful tomorrow. I stared at the message. Tomorrow. The day everything would finally come into the open. The day the hidden document would stop being a secret. And as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, I knew one thing for certain. They weren't ready for what I was about to expose. The courthouse smelled like old paper, disinfectant, and tension. I felt it the moment I stepped inside. Echoes of footsteps bounced off marble floors. Low murmurs filled the air, layered with the metallic clink of security gates and the distant slam of heavy doors. Everything about the place was designed to remind you that power lived here, and that it didn't care how nervous you were. I adjusted my coat and kept walking. Richard was already there. I spotted him near the elevator, speaking in low tones to his attorney. He looked composed, as always. Tailored suit, calm posture, but his hands gave him away. Fingers tapping too fast against his briefcase. Jaw set just a little too tight. When his eyes found mine, something changed. For the first time since this began, he didn't smile. Marcus stood a few feet behind him, scrolling on his phone like this was just another inconvenience. Lorraine wasn't there yet, which told me she was either late or scared. Ms. Alvarez met me near the benches outside the courtroom. They filed a motion to dismiss this morning, she said quietly. Of course they did. It won't hold, she added. Not with what we have. I nodded, my pulse steady now. The fear had burned away completely. What replaced it felt heavier, but clearer. Purpose has a way of doing that. Lorraine arrived 10 minutes later, flanked by her own attorney. Pearls still perfect, lipstick untouched. When she saw me, she looked away quickly. Court was called to order. Wood creaked as everyone stood. The judge entered, face unreadable, the room settling into a tense stillness. This wasn't the final hearing. This was preliminary. Motions, arguments, positioning. But everyone in that room knew something larger was unfolding. Richard's attorney spoke first, polished, confident. He framed the amendment as the final considered wish of a dying woman, emphasized family harmony, suggested grief had clouded my judgment. I listened without reacting. Then Ms. Alvarez stood, and everything shifted. She spoke calmly, deliberately. She introduced the trust deed, the contingency clause, the medical records, the timestamps, the security footage logs. She didn't dramatize it. She didn't need to. Truth has weight all on its own. Richard's attorney objected, frequently, desperately. The judge overruled him more than once. When Denise's affidavit was submitted into evidence, I felt Richard's gaze on me like heat. Not anger, fear. During a recess, chaos broke loose in the hallway. The lawyer who had witnessed the amendment, the same one who'd avoided my eyes that night, stepped out of a private conference room, face pale, tie loosened. He spoke briefly to Richard, then shook his head. Whatever he said landed hard. Richard's shoulders stiffened. Lorraine cornered Marcus near the water fountain, her voice sharp, no longer controlled. I couldn't hear the words, but I didn't need to. This wasn't a family anymore. It was a structure collapsing from the inside. Ms. Alvarez leaned toward me. "They're offering a settlement," she whispered. "Already?" I asked. "Significant," she said. "Enough to walk away very comfortable?" I shook my head without hesitation. "No." She searched my face, then nodded. "That's what I thought." Court resumed. Then something unexpected happened. Richard asked to address the court. The room stilled. His attorney leaned toward him, whispering urgently. But Richard stood anyway, slowly, carefully, like a man stepping onto thin ice he knew might crack. He cleared his throat. "I acted," he said, voice steady but strained, "in what I believed were my wife's best interests." My chest tightened at the word wife. She was confused, he continued, vulnerable, and I was trying to preserve the family's stability. Ms. Alvarez rose. "Are you stating under oath that she understood the amendment when she signed it?" Richard hesitated. Just for a second. The judge leaned forward slightly. "I believe she trusted me," Richard said. That wasn't an answer. The judge's eyes narrowed, silence stretched. Then Lorraine stood abruptly. "This is absurd," she snapped. "He's taking the fall while everyone ignores her behavior." Every head turned. She pointed at me, hand shaking. "She was never supposed to get that money. Never. She manipulated her mother emotionally for years." I felt the accusation hit the room like shattered glass. Ms. Alvarez didn't even stand. "Do you have evidence of that?" she asked calmly. Lorraine opened her mouth, then closed it. Marcus stared at her in disbelief. The judge called for order, voice sharp now, irritation cutting through the room. Lorraine was instructed to sit down. She did, slowly, trembling with fury. And that's when it happened. The judge reviewed the contingency clause aloud. Every word echoed. "If undue influence, fraud, or coercion is established, immediate transfer of all trust assets to the original primary beneficiary." Me. The judge looked up. "Pending full adjudication, this court orders all trust assets remain frozen and provisionally recognizes Ms. Carter as the controlling beneficiary." The sound in the room was visceral. Lorraine gasped. Marcus swore under his breath. Richard closed his eyes. I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't breathe, because I knew this wasn't the end. Outside the courtroom, reporters were already gathering. Questions flew, cameras clicked. Ms. Alvarez shielded me as we moved through the crowd. But before we reached the doors, Richard's voice cut through everything. "This isn't over." I turned. He was standing alone now. Lorraine and Marcus had drifted away, already protecting themselves. "This will destroy you too," he said quietly. "That money will cost you everything." I looked at him, really looked at the man who had tried to erase me. "No," I said. It already cost me everything. I survived that. For the first time, he had nothing to say. That night, alone in my apartment, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window, city lights flickering below. My phone buzzed with notifications I didn't open, messages, news alerts, speculation. Then one message slipped through, from an unknown number. "You think you won. Check the offshore account." My heart dropped, because suddenly, I understood. Freezing the trust wasn't enough. They had already moved something, and whatever it was, could change everything. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Then I read it again. "Check the offshore account." The wine in my glass went untouched. My pulse slowed, not because I was calm, but because instinct had taken over. This was the last move. I could feel it, the desperate one you make when the ground is already giving way beneath your feet. I called Ms. Alvarez. She answered on the second ring. "They moved money," I said. There was a pause. Keyboard clicks in the background. "How do you know?" "Anonymous tip," I replied. "Offshore." She exhaled sharply. I was afraid of that. "Can we trace it?" "Yes," she said. "But not tonight, and not quietly." That word hung in the air. Not quietly. I hung up and opened my laptop, pulling up everything Denise had given me again. Emails, transfers, patterns I hadn't focused on before. Richard was careful, but not perfect. Nobody ever is when they think they've already won. And then I saw it. A holding company. Registered years ago. Not in Richard's name, not in Lorraine's. In my mother's. My breath caught. The offshore account wasn't new. It was old, shielded, protected, and never mentioned in the amendment. I leaned back slowly, heart pounding, as a different possibility began to form. Not theft, a contingency. One last layer my mother had built in case someone tried to outsmart her. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Denise. "I heard about the hearing," she said softly. "I'm glad you held your ground." "Denise," I said, "did my mother ever mention a backup? Another account?" She was quiet for a moment. "Yes," she said. "She asked me once if I believe people show their true selves when they think no one's watching." My throat tightened. "She said," Denise continued, "if something disappears after I'm gone, I want my daughter to know it was never meant to be found by them." I closed my eyes. That night, I didn't sleep. By morning, the story was everywhere. Headlines screamed about forged wills, abuse allegations, frozen fortunes. Reporters camped outside the brownstone Richard once bragged about owning. Lorraine's charity board quietly removed her name from their website. Marcus deleted his social media. And Richard? He went silent. No statements, no appearances. At noon, Ms. Alvarez called. "We found it," she said. My chest tightened. And it's devastating," she replied. "For him." The offshore account was clean, legal, shielded by layers of compliance and timing, created before Richard ever entered our lives. Fully documented. My mother's signature. Clear, strong, unquestionable. The funds inside it weren't just substantial, they were untouched, which meant one thing. She never trusted him. By the end of the week, criminal charges were filed: forgery, coercion, financial abuse. The lawyer who helped Richard cooperated fully. In exchange for leniency, he handed over everything: emails, recorded calls, draft versions of the amendment showing my name crossed out in red. Lorraine tried to distance herself, claimed ignorance. The paper trail disagreed. Marcus disappeared the moment subpoenas went out. Richard was arrested quietly, early in the morning, as neighbors watched from behind their curtains. No speech, no smile, just handcuffs and the dull sound of consequences finally arriving. I wasn't there. I didn't need to be. Weeks later, I stood in my mother's old bedroom, sunlight streaming through sheer curtains, dust motes floating gently in the air. The house felt different now. Not triumphant, honest. I opened the bottom drawer of her dresser for the first time since she passed. Inside was a single envelope. My name, her handwriting. My hands shook as I opened it. If you're reading this, they showed you who they really are. Tears blurred my vision. I didn't fail you, and you didn't fail me. I sat on the edge of the bed, letter pressed to my chest. The weight I'd been carrying for months finally beginning to lift. The fortune transferred legally a month later, every dollar, every asset. But the money didn't feel like victory. Truth did, silence did, freedom did. I sold the house, donated what no longer felt necessary, built something new, not loud, not flashy, but safe. A life no one could erase with a signature. Sometimes people ask if I regret exposing my family. I don't. Because what they called family was just proximity. What I earned was clarity. And that hidden document, it didn't just shatter their greedy victory. It revealed something far more important. I was never powerless. They just needed me to believe I was. If you're still here, comment your thoughts. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this.